Oh, hi there. A while back, a fan told me about a potential lost media search related to Charlie Day of the long-running sitcom It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, a show I absolutely love. I watched the episode Who Pooped the Bed when it first aired on FX and completely lost my mind.
Because poop is funny.
Anyways, during an episode of the show Hot Ones, Day talks about one of his first acting gigs where he played a man at a bar and actually had a few lines. He didn't remember the name of the gig and never heard anything about it until years later on his IMDb page. He was credited for a role in Erotic Tales 4, which he assumed to be an adult film. Despite the name, it turns out the movie was not adult, just poorly named, and his performance was cut, meaning that there might be an early Charlie Day performance in a vault somewhere, or scrapped altogether since the production was so small. But in looking for Charlie's lost performance, I came across a few very interesting pieces of lost media related to It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, that in its historic 15-season run, the lost pilot episodes. Now, so many TV shows have an episode shot to get a network interested in airing their show. Some of these pilot episodes become the show's first episode, but in many cases, they are simply never released to the public. But in the case of It's Always Sunny, it has one of the most interesting pilots in sitcom history, and despite the show's 15-season run, it remains partially lost. The version of It's Always Sunny we know today stars Rob McElhenney as Mac, Glenn Howerton as Dennis, Charlie Day as Charlie, Caitlin Olsen as Sweet D, and Danny DeVito as Frank, starting in the second season. But in the beginning, the role of Sweet D was played by Jordan Reed, who was dating Rob at the time. Rob, Glenn, Charlie, and Jordan were all struggling actors in LA in the late 90s and early 2000s. Just for fun, they got together to make an amateur short film, and this film was amateur in every sense. Filmed in Jordan and Glenn's apartments, made with handheld camcorders operated by whichever actor wasn't in the scene. The only cost of production was the tapes needed for the camera, coming out to between $800 to $200, and employing their friends as additional characters, like Charlie's girlfriend and future wife, Mary Elizabeth Ellis, as the waitress. Glenn's college friend, Marina Baccarin, played Carmen, and Artemis Pebdani played Artemis, naming their short It's Always Sunny on TV. The story followed a group of struggling actors in LA, stemming from an idea that Rob had, where a friend came over to another friend's house to get sugar, and the friend tells him he has cancer, and all the guy can think about is getting his sugar and getting out of there. If this sounds familiar, that's because it would become the fourth episode of the series, Charlie Has Cancer. By the end of filming, the gang had a 25 to 26 minute long short film that they decided to shop around to TV networks in hopes of it being made into a TV series. Showing off It's Always Sunny on TV to Fox, HBO, Comedy Central, VH1, MTV, CBS, finally bringing it to FX, who picked it up, with a few conditions. 1, it can't be based in LA. 2, they couldn't be struggling actors. And 3, the show was greenlit, but they had to reshoot the pilot with a budget of $400,000, making the original $800 to $200 pilot for It's Always Sunny on TV the cheapest greenlit pilot in TV history. They of course jumped at the chance to reshoot the pilot. Rob chose to set the show in his hometown of Philly and had the gang owning a failing bar. Despite shooting the pilot multiple times, no version has been aired in its entirety, because after reshoots, Jordan and Rob would break up, and Jordan was replaced with Caitlin Olsen. The pilot would then be filmed for a final time, and became the episode Charlie Has Cancer. The season 1 and 2 DVD release has portions of the pilot, but no footage with Jordan Reed as Dee, and she has since been removed from the narrative of the show's creation, though Jordan has claimed that she co-created the show through her involvement in the pilot. Scenes featuring Jordan were released on her Instagram that appear to be from the reshot pilot, showing that they did keep a few scenes in the final episode, but you can see the bar is completely different. There's one additional clip that can be found online from the homemade pilot, a scene showing Artemis auditioning similarly to how she auditions in episode 4 of the show, but this time the audition takes place in an apartment, and instead of auditioning using a scene from Coyote Ugly, she uses a made-up Lifetime movie called Not So Fat Anymore, but it still has similar comedy beats to the aired version. Charlie Has Cancer became the 4th episode of the series, and some scenes are shot-for-shot remakes of the pilot, but the final version comes out to about 22 minutes, including the opening and closing credits. And It's Always Sunny on TV was between 25 to 26 minutes, probably with a much shorter opening and closing sequence, if any were used at all. The 2 scenes released on DVD from the homemade pilot add up to about 7 minutes. The Artemis audition scene is 2 minutes, and 6 minutes of footage was uploaded by Jordan Reed, totaling to about 15 minutes of released content between the 2 versions, leaving about 10 minutes of each version of It's Always Sunny's pilot episodes unreleased. But there is another lost It's Always Sunny pilot, and one that I honestly want way more. As unbelievable as it sounds, Rob McElhenney initially wanted to work behind the scenes, and the role of Mac was played by David Hornsby, who would go on to play Rickety Cricket in the show. The idea of this blows my mind. There is no way this version of the show could possibly work, and the gang seems to agree. Charlie Day referred to this version of the pilot as not good. And as of right now, no clip or screenshot exists of what I've dubbed the cricket cut.
What is your confession? I'm fat.
The gang gets successful. While I think there's a solid possibility that all versions of the pilot will leak someday, for this next lost episode, I would be surprised if it's ever fully released. Season 6 was difficult for It's Always Sunny. A Christmas special aired that season, bringing the episode count to 14, a higher episode count than any following seasons. Caitlin Olsen was pregnant, which had to be written into the show. And in the fray, the gang lost an episode. Kind of. The episode The Gang Gets Successful was written and filmed with the rest of Season 6, given a production code of XIP06004, implying that it was the 4th episode filmed of Season 6. But this doesn't necessarily mean it was going to be the 4th episode to air. If you look at the release schedule for Season 6, there's a 2-week gap between the release of Episode 10, Charlie Kelly, King of the Rats, and Episode 11, The Gang Gets Stranded in the Woods. This leads me to believe that The Gang Gets Successful was meant to air on November 25th, 2010, as the 11th episode of Season 6. But there are gaps in the release schedule of other seasons that don't have unaired episodes, so this is just speculation. But this unaired episode is not entirely lost. We actually have a decent chunk of it. Part of the unaired episode was reused for the Season 7 episode, How Mac Got Fat. Just like the title suggests, this episode explains Mac's massive weight gain between Season 6 and 7 that actor Rob McElhenney intentionally gained for the show. In the episode, Mac goes to confessional and confesses that he got fat, but explains to the priest how it's not his fault by making extensive use of flashbacks to before his weight gain. And most of these flashback scenes were repurposed from the unaired episode, The Gang Gets Successful, creating a really impressive effect where you can see Mac before and after the weight gain without the use of makeup or prosthetics.
You have candy coming out of your pocket!
So, how much of the episode was repurposed for Season 7, and how much is new footage? Every scene with Mac in confessional is new footage, and the majority of flashbacks are taken from the unaired episode, but not every flashback is old footage. There's a scene towards the end where it appears that all footage of Dee and Frank is new, and every time we see Dennis and Charlie comes from the cancelled episode. This is pretty obvious because each group is never in the same frame as the other, a classic sign of reshoots. But there is a smoking gun left in the episode. In the scene where Dennis and Charlie are getting high in the back, in the left of the frame, you can see a shoulder of another character not in the scene that I believe is Mac. And this can be verified through a DVD release that gives us a short clip of this scene before it was re-edited for How Mac Got Fat, showing that in the original episode filmed for Season 6, Mac was in this scene, but through clever editing, he was mostly removed. If we break down the episode, without the theme song and ending credits, the episode is about 20 minutes long. The newly shot confessional scenes account for about 4 minutes, the reshoots at the end are about 1 minute and 10 seconds, and the new ending with Fat Mac is 2.5 minutes, coming out to about 7 minutes and 40 seconds of new footage shot exclusively for this episode, with the rest being repurposed from the unaired episode, coming out to about 12 minutes and 20 seconds, meaning that we do have over half of The Gang Gets Successful. And if we were only to watch these 12 minutes, we would get the gist of the story. The bar becomes successful, and the gang self-sabotages as usual. But it leaves us with a pretty unsatisfying episode, with no real conclusion. Aside from the clips of the unaired episode that were repurposed in How Mac Got Fat, there's a small clip of The Gang Gets Successful in the trailer for Season 6, where we can see a few frames of the meat bomb that Frank talks about in How Mac Got Fat, that we never really get the payoff to in the final episode. MEATBOMB, telling us that even late into development, The Gang Gets Successful was part of Season 6. Though there's never been any reason given to why this completed episode went unaired, there is a possibility that it was intentional. One theory is that at the end of filming Season 6, Rob McElhenney decided to gain 60 pounds of fat for the role, and the production team thought Season 6 had enough episodes with the Christmas special, and decided to repurpose The Gang Gets Successful to explain Mac's weight gain in the next season. But I really think the easier answer is that the episode was scrapped and they took advantage of it. And I think this says so much about how great this show is. The episode How Mac Got Fat is a bit messy when you know it was cobbled together with unused footage, but it works. It's a creative way to make use of the footage. It effectively explains Mac's weight gain. It uses footage of Mac before and after the weight gain, and it's funny. But I can't help but wonder how the show would have explained Mac's weight gain if the episode did air, and what iconic lines we could potentially be missing. In the partially lost episode, the gang gets successful. Thank you so much for watching. I made this video because of fan comments made a long time ago, so let me know what else you want me to cover, and even though it might be a while, your suggestion might make it into a future video. This is Mike with All Things Lost. See you soon.